Welcome everybody here tonight and those watching the archive. This is Quick Tips for Writing Quickly. My name is Christine Cairns and I'm from the Writing Center and I'm happy to be your presenter tonight. This workshop is being recorded for future use and display. And we'll get started. Welcome everybody once again. So our primary objective is to identify some ways to write more in less time. There's a lot to this writing business, and in this workshop, we'll look at ways to make more time for writing and how you can use your writing time better. We'll answer the following questions. Are you ready to write? Where are your resources? What's your process? What's expected? And finally, I'll also provide you tools and tips to help you write more in less time. And these are real general questions. You're going to find that I'm going to provide you lots of specifics in this workshop. If you have questions, feel free to type them in the chat. I'll try to monitor that and leave time at the end. Okay, we have a bunch of ideas to cover. So, okay, well, tortoises are welcome. Hopefully you'll leave here with some strategies to help you write more quickly or actually use your writing time more efficiently. So what is the first thing you do when you sit down to write? Feel free to type something in the chat. What's the first thing you do when you sit down to write? Like, I have to write a paper. It sure could. Yeah. You panic? Wonderful. Okay. I'm sorry. I hear you. I think I do as well. Read the topic and our questions. All right. Try to think how to start it. Okay. Yes, I get the paper all set up first. That's very good. All right. So you're all thinking like writers already, sounds like. Yes, it can be stressful. And one thing I find is that we will often, this is really common for experienced writers and first-year college writers, we sit down to write before we're ready. And then we have writer's block. So writer's block can be prevented with preparation. So I'm going to talk about that first. And not just writer's block. Writer's block is caused by anxiety as well, right? That stress and worry. So I think one of you mentioned that read the topic under questions. That is a very good place to begin. The first step to preparing for writing is reading the assignment. And not just reading it, but understanding it. As a writing tutor, I've helped many college writers with writer's block who asked for help getting started writing, but they haven't yet read the assignment to the point of understanding it. So before you start writing, you want to feel confident that you know what you need to do. It's hard enough generating new ideas, let alone trying to do so when you aren't sure what you're supposed to be writing. So reading your assignment requires a kind of metacognition or meta-thinking, which is thinking about your thinking. As you read your assignment, you want to consciously think about what you're understanding and what you want. Writing assignments present the expectations to adhere to, such as using a formal voice or writing in APA style. And the instructions will also provide the parameters for your writing, such as how long the paper needs to be or how many sources to use, which will be important in how you schedule your writing task. But even before that, checking your understanding as you read these assignment specifications will ensure you do not gloss over what you don't understand or miss the purpose of the assignment or keywords such as synthesize or evaluate that essentially tell you how to write the paper. As you read and think about your assignment, make note of any terms you need defined or concepts you need clarified, and look these up or ask your peers, instructor, or a tutor. The first step in writing quickly is knowing the objectives of your writing assignment. And I know it probably sounds really obvious, but we read these over, we see the word APA, and then we don't even read the rest of we think we're reading the rest of the instructions, but we've just kind of we've gone off into some kind of zone of unknowing, and then we kind of wait till we sit down to finally write that paper to go, okay, let's figure out what this APA business is. And then you're not using your writing time writing. You're using your writing time to figure out what APA is, or to go back to the instructions and go, wait, no, what else did it say? Okay, so when you first get that assignment, take some time with it, read it, think about it, make note of what you don't understand. Exactly, Mike. I do that. I recommend that as well, to use that assignment as you kind of break it down into an outline, right? That you flesh out then when you write. But so that's one way to break down the, if you get overwhelmed with the block of assignment instructions, maybe turn them into bullet points. That's another strategy. So next is to start thinking about what you're going to write, your topic. So, of course, writing itself triggers thinking, and you need to think as you write and write as you think. But you also need to give some thought to your topic before you begin writing. If you sit down to write and only then start to think about the topic, you'll be thinking and not writing. So, to write quickly, do some thinking first. I can spend 12 to 24 hours musing over a topic before I feel like I have something to say about it. And this isn't procrastination at this point. It's time-saving strategy before you sit down to write. Take some time to ask yourself important questions like, well, what do I already know about it? Or why does this topic even matter, and to whom? Or if you don't have a topic in mind, this is a time to ask yourself, what piques my interest right now? So, especially if you know you won't have time for several days to begin writing due to your work schedule or other obligations outside school, don't wait until then to start thinking about it. You can think about the topic while you're on the go, while waiting for an appointment, or while you're in the shower or driving to work, or in other words, while you're not at your computer, using your writing time thinking. Okay, so another strategy for writing quickly is to make sure you've already given your topic some thought. If you don't already carry around a notepad or a pen, or I use that voice memo app on my phone. And then when I think of something that I want to stick with me, I can write it down or record the thought on my app. It's never too early to start pre-writing. And there's no one way to do it. So while you're thinking about it, if something comes up, you can jot it down, just informally, just to remember. So consider you have about 16 hours in a day that you're awake doing stuff, right? You have stuff going on. So you want to use any idle time you have, even waiting for the microwave to ding, to jot down a thought or a question or just something. You got to start thinking like a writer from the very beginning. You start paying attention and look for connections. Exactly. Right. So, people don't have time to write, but then they sit down to write and they haven't really processed the assignment or given their topic some serious thought, like, why do I want to write about this? Or, wow, I have to write about this? Why do I have to write about just kind of think through those questions that would actually keep you sitting at your desk staring at the blank screen going, I don't even know what to say. So think about it for a bit. Then, once you've read the assignment with an aim to understand it, not just read it and skip over, I'm not sure what that means, but I'll figure it out as I go. No, after you have read the assignment, thought about it, given some thought to your topic, it's pretty common to be even more unsure than you were before. It's funny how the more you know, the more you still need to know. But what questions do you have? Now's the time to ask them. Maybe you have 2 topic ideas and aren't sure which one to pursue. Peers are an invaluable resource for feedback on topic ideas. And your discussion boards in class are pretty much designed to get some peer feedback, so take advantage of that. You can also ask a tutor. And let me see if I can grab this link for you and put it in the chat. Ask a tutor. Here we go. Hopefully that works. This is our Q&A service. So get that question off your mind right away and get some feedback coming back to you. Tutors will brainstorm with you. They will help you with writing terms that you're not sure about. They'll help you with pre-writing strategies, or they'll help you break down that assignment, into points, and so you know more specifically what you need to do. And then your instructor is also a great person to turn to with questions about assignment expectations or parameters. So, and you can also talk to others, like family, friends, people in your community, like strike up a conversation with, the lady at the checkout, or on Facebook, get some feedback on your topic so you have some new ways to think about it, and you'll have more to say when it comes down to writing about it. One of the greatest and often overlooked aspects of college writing is that you aren't alone. I mean, look at this big group of people at this workshop. You are not alone in this. Talking to others about your writing or your ideas for writing is a great way to connect what you're doing in college to the real world and gain a better insight into how to communicate your ideas with others, as that's what college writing is. It's communication. Okay, so before you sit down to write, you got to get clear on the assignment. Give your topic some thought. You don't have to have all the answers then. It's not like the old days where they really do think you're supposed to think about it and then you write it and then it's done. You do think as you write, but you still have to give it some thought before you go into it. You have to kind of feel like, I think I have something to say about this. Like, make some connection with it. Talking to others can really help getting your questions answered. So I'm going to go through, she asked, what do you do when you get stuck when writing a paper? Most of these strategies are kind of built on this idea that we get blocked when we're writing. And so kind of going through the various blocks, like you sit down and it's like, well, I haven't read the assignment. I don't even understand the assignment. What does this even mean to synthesize? Or I'm blocked because I don't know what to say. Well, I haven't really thought about the topic. So that's another thing too. I'm going to continue with some more possible writing blocks and some strategies to help you, because they definitely slow down the writing. All right. So what is your schedule? You are going to college online and you're attending a workshop on writing quickly. So I imagine you've got a busy schedule already, or you wouldn't be here. So what do you do right now to keep track of everything you have to do? Do you use a calendar app? I am completely dependent on my Gmail, Google Calendar. And Gmail has that little, that the app's up in the right-hand corner. You can click that calendar app and start scheduling things, right? So that's what I use that app particularly, but there's others. And one thing I know though, and you're going to like and not like this, or not like it and like it, but one thing I know for sure about college is that it doesn't get easier, but it does get more predictable, and you can plan for that. And here are some general guidelines. Okay. Expect to do 2 additional hours of homework, reading and writing, for every credit hour you take. As an undergrad, you double that for a grad student. So a 5 credit hour course like Comp 1 would equate to about 15 hours a week. 5 of those hours would be spent logged into the course, attending seminar, completing asynchronous discussions, peer-to-peer work, maybe taking quizzes or doing other in-class activities. You're logged into the class and reading, the reading that's built into the course. Maybe attending your instructor's office hours. So anything related to that in-class work. That's about 5 hours a week. So, and of course you can use some of those hours outside of class if you don't have a lot to do in the class that week, maybe just a couple hours. But 10 of those hours would be done outside class reading. And it probably seems like a lot. So outside of class, that's reading your texts, any assigned readings you're given, writing your papers, researching, attending tutoring during the writing process. And tutors also help with reading comprehension and the use and integration of sources of research and writing, APA. So with 7 days in a week, that would be a little more than 2 hours a day if you split it up, right? To complete all the work expected from a 5-credit course, undergrad course. And a 2-hour chunk of time might not be doable for you every day because of life. I know it's not for me to spend that much time writing, but what if you broke it down into 15 to 30 minute chunks? Do you have 15 minutes here or there at random times? Okay, so another great strategy for writing quickly is to spread out the hours. This is the most effective way to make better use of your writing time. You want to plan for shorter blocks of time. Don't save everything for all day on Sunday or, all Tuesday night because it's your only, block where you're not working or you don't have the kids. So you want to plan for shorter blocks of time for the initial reading and understanding of the assignment, for asking questions and thinking about the topic. Like squeeze that in a schedule it even. Put it on your calendar. Get an alert. Maybe you're in your car, you're at the grocery store, and you get an alert saying you have 15 minutes to think about your topic. So start thinking about it right then. Really, you kind of have to fit this stuff into your day because we all have, so much going on, but we also have so many hours in the day, and it can be done. It is doable. But you have to be realistic about the time. If you save everything for one day, it's going to be real hard to write that whole paper because there's so much involved. So the writing process itself should also be broken into segments of time and not planned to be done all in one sitting. I'll speak more about the writing process in a bit, but here are some planning tips for saving time and writing quickly when it's time to write. Okay, again, spread out the hours. Do not wait until seminar to get started. You'll get your assignment the first day of the unit, which is a Wednesday, right? If you do not have seminar until Sunday night, don't wait until then to ask your initial questions. You can email your instructor or ask a peer, or if you don't understand the assignment, a tutor could probably help you figure out the key components of that. So don't wait to get started. Then if you can, create a task list every day, or spread out what you want to accomplish throughout the week, and then where you can get the preparation done and break up the writing process and ask, what would only take 15 minutes, or what can you do in this 15 minutes of time? What can be done while you're not at your desk? What day do you have the most time available? For me, that would be every other Saturday. It's like that. I'm that busy. But of course, I can't wait till every other Saturday to get my work done. So I have to chunk it up. 15 minutes here, an hour there. So schedule the weekly hours around the day you have the most time. And that's the day when you're writing and not still preparing to write. Yeah, procrastination is part of it. And I think if you allow some time for digesting the assignment, processing the topic. If you break it up into smaller tasks, it might not be so overwhelming, because it's very easy to procrastinate when you have a 10-page paper to write. You're like, oh, I don't even know how to get started. So these tips are kind of helping you get started. Do what kind of build into it. You kind of have to build your confidence, feeling good about the assignment and the topic. You get your questions answered, you make a schedule, and all these things kind of satisfy that procrastination bug too, because it's like, I'm doing little things, not really writing yet, but really, if you do all this stuff in the meantime, you'll be ready to write when you do have to sit down and do it. Another part of preparation is your research. So if you have one day to write and you've sat down and you haven't even done your research yet, well, you're going to spend your time researching and not writing. And it is different. It's a different process. So when you conduct research, you're basically, first of all, you have to ask yourself, what do I already know about the topic? And you can pre-write to figure out what you already know and kind of exhaust yourself so that you find out what you don't know, what you need to find out. But even papers that don't require research, a common writing block is just not knowing what to say. And this is almost always due to not having enough information. So learning about the topic before you write can help you write more quickly because you'll have more ideas about it. And if you are doing a research paper, then conducting research first is pretty essential. So a paper may help you to think of a paper as a discussion. So first you need to find out what is already being discussed on this topic. What are other people, ideally experts, but really anyone really to get your ideas going, what are they saying about this topic? Who's talking about it? Where are they talking about it? Why are they talking about it? Who's reading about this? Who cares, right? So researching is kind of about you pick something that you're interested in and go find out who else is interested in this. What are people saying about it? And then as you write about it, you can refer to these various sources, ideas, and quotes, and then add your thoughts. I know I'm kind of simplifying it, but I think it really helps to just put it in context. You're not being asked to be the expert. You're kind of being asked to just join a conversation. And you don't have to know everything. It's more like you're reacting to or reflecting on or analyzing what other people are saying. And then your goal is to learn how to contribute your voice to that discussion on that topic, to add your ideas to an existing body of knowledge, or to help others see something in a new way, your way. So research allows you to do that. But if you sit down to write, and if you haven't yet conducted your research, then you aren't yet writing. And you can't write quickly if you are still conducting your research, because that involves reading. And you're going to find many good research strategies in the library and in the Writing Center. And one method that the library director, Matt Stevens, recommends is TORCH. It stands for Teach Yourself About the Topic, Organize Your Thoughts, Research is in the middle there. Check your research and get help. So the research has its own process going on, and it's something you have to make time for before you sit down to write your paper. You want to get all the information you're going to need first. Okay? Christopher, you asked a question. If two people are working on separate assignments and still benefit each other in the writing method, I think it's very important to talk to other people who are writing. I mean, it helps you think like a writer. It helps you get a reader's response to your ideas. So I'm not sure the context of your question specifically, but we can pick up on that at the end of the workshop if you like. So along with your research, part of preparing for writing is gathering your resources for use throughout the writing process. So the pre-digital age, your resources would have been like your writing handbook, style guide, a dictionary, a thesaurus, right, sitting on your desk. ready for use. And now all these resources are available online. And the Writing Reference Library in the Writing Center has a writing guide on just about every writing concept related to college writing. It's your free writing handbook. And many of the resources come as podcasts and videos, which you can watch or listen to on your mobile device. So if you have earbuds, you can listen to a podcast on developing a thesis statement while you are walking the dog or doing the dishes or, driving to the store. Or instead of scrolling Facebook between commercials, scroll through the resource and APA citation. This is where you kind of find, I'm going to spend at least 15 minutes today learning about APA at some point today. So open up that resource, and when you have time to listen to the podcast or scroll through it, you can do that on your phone or your tablet, iPad. Also, don't wait until your writing time to learn a new concept. So use the writing process to practice it or try it, but have some ideas about what you're going to try ahead of time. And if you will, and if you do, you'll write more quickly. If you know the comma rules in advance, for example, you won't be editing commas so much in the end. Again, you'll write more quickly. In the Writing Center, we have a writing guides on writing introductions and conclusions. So if you read through these different strategies, when you're writing your paper, you'll already think, oh, you know what, I'm going to use that strategy right there. And so you're not just reinventing the wheel. You've already seen a bunch of examples, and you're going into the writing, already know you're going to try this approach. Okay? So even if you don't read any resources ahead of time, opening the page, having them ready so you can get a quick question answered right away. So I've referred several times to the writing process, and getting into a writer's mindset is part of that. It'll help with procrastination too. And now the writer's mindset for some, it's going to be different for all of us. For some, it can be a comfort or a help to hear some hum of people in the background or music in the background or noise in the background. Everyone has kind of their own ideal writing environment or setting. But maybe you think you love to write to music or some noise. But if that environment causes distractions that interrupt you, you're going to lose your focus and flow and write more slowly. So whenever you do sit down to write, you've done all that preliminary work, I'm ready to write my paper now. I have an idea. It's very important to minimize the distractions. So whatever that means to you. Maybe get some soft earplugs if you have kids playing Xbox right next to you. Or if you're in a busy workplace and you're trying to, accomplish something on your lunch hour. Just so you can tune out the distractions and get into a writer's mindset where you can look at the language and ideas on the page and think about what you are saying, what you are writing. So this is a step in preparation, but it's also just throughout the writing process. You need some space, don't you? I mean, I do. When I'm drafting, I can often put music on just to kind of get me into a creative flow and get me out of kind of an editing critical. I don't want to criticize myself as I'm trying to generate ideas. So I might start with some music, but then as soon as I get into that revision editing process, I need it quiet. I need to focus. I need to hear my voice on the page. I need to read it, and when I'm reading it, I want to hear myself and how I sound, right? Because I don't want to sound, confused or monotone or too sharp. So it helps to have a writer's mindset, a writer's space, okay? Because a writer's mindset, it's basically you're a thinker, so you need kind of that maybe stillness to think. You're a questioner, so your mind also has to kind of be in kind of a questioning mode. You're exploring ideas. Did you know that essay comes from the French verb essayer, which means to try? or to attempt. So when you're writing an essay, you're actually trying to figure out something. You're trying to expose the truth about something. You're attempting. It's an attempt. It's a discussion. You're not carving in stone. You're talking about something, okay? So you want to explore, analyze, and ideally communicate. Communicate with others that are going to read your paper. Who wants you to use commas too often, Mike? Oh, Grammarly, yeah. Yeah, see, the thing is with that, that's a real later stage feedback. And when you're just writing a draft, if you just have a first draft, you need early stage feedback about the ideas and organization. So you don't want to get caught up in commas too early. And that goes to the process. What's your process? Part of the mindset is also how you approach writing. And there are several steps to writing a paper. And as steps, they're done in phases over time, not all at once. Writing is a process. One major cause of writer's block, or writing very slowly, is trying to do everything at once. Writing, rereading, revising, editing, all while trying to write the introduction. It's very difficult to compose a draft when thinking like an editor, or when trying to make it perfect, or going into it saying, this is going to be the best paper I've ever written. Even if you have a short piece to write, like a 250-word discussion post, for example, this is like writing one page double-spaced. You want to break the task into stages where each stage allows for the kind of thinking needed to first come up with your idea, then a different kind of thinking to organize it into a beginning, middle, and end, and then there's a different kind of thinking to revise it by anticipating what a reader would need in order to understand or believe you. And then it's a whole different kind of thinking to edit so readers are drawn to your ideas instead of the peculiarities of your language usage or your style, right? So you want to make it reader-friendly, but you don't want to make it reader-friendly when you're just getting that first draft out. You're just trying to get your ideas down, right? You're writing for you when you begin. You're just trying to connect with your topic and explore it. So when you write as a process, you won't have to sacrifice quality for quickness. In other words, quickness comes down to being prepared, doing your research, having resources ready, and giving each stage of the process proper attention so you don't end up turning in a first draft for a grade because you ran out of time before you could edit it or even get feedback on it, right? So when you schedule your writing time, I want you to try to factor in these stages. Chunk up the time. I'm not saying you need more time to write your paper by breaking it up. I'm saying you actually kind of need less. Is you want to spread it out. Smaller increments of time. I think it's easier for us to find smaller increments. If you only have one day and it's all day, take breaks, plan breaks, for schedule in your trip to the store and the things you need to do to procrastinate. Think about it. Let your writing kind of, saute, if you will. So if you find it easier to schedule an hour in a day most days and have only one day where you have a big block of time, plan for that time to be revising. And look where that is. It's step 3. And if you plan for drafting and revising that day, allow a break in the middle. But otherwise, try to save the big chunk of time for revising and then create, add a little bit of time later to do the final edit and the proofreading where you're just looking at the language and not still trying to make the ideas clear or convincing. So drafting, this step 2, requires a commitment to take a thought through a full discussion. But so revising, however, requires rereading and rewriting, and it usually takes longer. So it works best when you have a whole draft written, so you can see it as a whole and know if the parts are cohesive. Here, let me, by prune, rough drafts tend to be very wordy. So pruning is cutting out the extra words. Like instead of saying something like, well, let's see. In the world today, you could just say today, because we all are in the world. I mean, just like the pruning is where you cut out kind of that, just the extra words, the filler words, you know, and sometimes it takes us more words to get to an idea, but then you kind of simplify it. Academic writing is kind of plain. It's not very fancy. The idea is to be clear. So, and clarity usually comes with simple, the simpler you can say it usually is the clearest, right? Which doesn't mean to cut out the content. It's just to, you know, cut out cliches or, you know, in this day and age. Again, in this day and age, those 5 words, you could just say today, right? Things like that. So pruning is when you're editing for concision. So what's expected? The revision process can go slowly or not happen at all if you don't know what's expected of a college essay. So I'd like to briefly review these expectations and provide some tips for writing each part. So to begin, essays have 3 main parts: a beginning, a middle, and an end, or an introduction, body, and conclusion. And each part is centered around one dominant idea, which is also called the thesis. The thesis is the idea that you want the reader to understand, or the idea you want the reader to believe about your topic. Such as that a change is important, or a system is ineffective. These are kind of templates for thesis statements, or that a certain policy should be implemented to solve a problem. In fact, most papers in college are about problems or issues, and you're either informing on what the problem is or the issue is, or you're persuading the readers on what should be done about it. Okay? It's many papers are like this. So as you draft, it's okay to think of these parts, but don't get too hung up on them, as revision is when you want to focus on these parts and you want to re-see how it's organized. Have you ever had to move into a new place to live? I've had to move. I think, you know, the past 3, I think I've lived in 3 houses the past 3 years. Okay, so you can think of the first draft like unloading the truck. You try to get the big things in the right rooms, you know, especially while you have people to help you. But when it comes to all those boxes, you just put them down where there's space, right? And then you rearrange as you unpack. You put everything where it needs to go as you unpack. So you unload first, then you unpack and organize. 2 different stages in the process that can be done at different times. Can you relate to that analogy somewhat? It could be like bringing in the groceries too. You set it all down first and then you put it away. So typically, the introduction is expected to introduce the topic of the essay with an attention getter, such as a surprising fact. The intro's job is also to define or narrow the topic to one perspective. So the topic is a really broad thing, and then you kind of narrow it to, this is the issue I'm going to discuss, or the problem that we're having with this. And then you kind of, that way you appeal to a specific audience. Then finally, your intro will either imply or more typically explicitly state your claim about that issue, and that's the thesis, which is typically 1 sentence at the end, and it states that something is true or so about the issue, or that something should be thought about it, or something should be done about it. And it's what the rest of the paper exists to help the reader understand or persuades the reader to believe is necessary. So here's some tips on writing an intro a little bit more quickly. First of all, draft the intro loosely. The first draft, do not fall in love with it, okay? Plan to revise. Write it. I mean, you can spend all day writing the intro and it's never quite right, you know? You have to kind of let go of that a little bit. Just get something written, have kind of a working thesis. I like to use the analogy of writing being like dating or getting to know someone. Consider the difference between introducing someone you just met to your friends or your family and introducing someone you actually know pretty well. It's far easier to introduce someone you know, and you'll know your topic much better after you've completed a whole draft on it. You'll know what's interesting about it, you'll know what you want to emphasize from the beginning to create a brief but clear snapshot in the intro. So this is why you won't want to become too attached to the rough draft of your intro, when you first draft the paper. Again, you want to commit to just writing from beginning to end when you write that rough draft. I mean, you can get an idea like this is the intro, this is the body, this is the conclusion, but that's kind of all based on your first impression and your initial ideas. So, one of the body paragraphs may end up having a better information to use for the beginning of the paper, okay? So, in the body, the paper is expected to be organized into paragraphs that present supporting points or details about the topic that illuminate your thesis. The body paragraphs serve the purpose of the thesis. They live to serve the thesis. If your purpose is to persuade your readers to think a certain course of action is going to solve a problem, then one paragraph might be a reason your proposed idea will work. Another paragraph might be a counter argument to a viewpoint that your reason won't work. So here's some tips. When you're writing those body paragraphs, especially if you struggle with not knowing what to say, try the PI paragraph develop method. Have you heard of this before? PI? It stands for point, illustrate, explain. Where every paragraph makes a point, and then you illustrate it with an example or evidence, and then you explain that or interpret it. Like you interpret what it means. Maybe you break down a term, like you quoted somebody as you illustrated your point, and maybe you interpret what that means, how the example or evidence supports your point, why it's important, how it ties to the rest of your discussion, or how it leads to the next point. So each paragraph is a pie, focused on one point that's discussed through illustration or example, and explanation or analysis. Second tip. And you know what, I almost told you too that each paragraph's like a hamburger. So instead of pie, you could also look at it like a hamburger, where you kind of have two buns. The top bun's the point, and the bottom bun's also kind of a summary point, and the middle is where you illustrate and explain. You got the meat in there is kind of your explanation or your analysis, and your illustration above it would be like, the lettuce or the cheese or the toppings that show and make it juicy, make it look good, and taste good. So another point, 80% discussion, 20% sources. Okay, so this is known as the 80-20 principle for integrating source information in your paper. In the PI method, we have a podcast on this too. In the PI method, the quote or paraphrase from the source would usually be the illustration or explanation part of the paragraph, where you make a point and support it with research, then discuss it. It's a good idea not to end a paragraph with your research. You want to use the research as kind of a point of illustration or maybe part of the explanation, but then go on to say something about it. You should have the last word. You are leading your readers through this discussion. Okay. Use opposing viewpoints. And this is like when you're doing research, don't just look for ideas that you agree with. Look for the ones you don't. And it's a great way to develop a discussion by bringing in ideas that are contrary to your own so you can show you understand what others are saying, and that you understand that others have a different viewpoint, and then use that as kind of a springboard to explain why your viewpoint is more reasonable or more valid. Okay, so you do want to, it's a good way to develop a paper or add more content, find something that's totally opposing to what you're saying and say, look what people are saying about this. But there's a flaw in their argument. They missed this whole point here that I'm saying, you know what I mean? So you can use opposing viewpoints to help you develop more content. And it also makes you more passionate about it, because all of a sudden you have something in your paper that you don't agree with. It gives you a lot to talk about to kind of defend your own position then, right? But it also shows you're being really fair. You've thoroughly done your research. You know that your way isn't the only way, but you do know your way is the best way, right? And use real world examples. That's another way to get writing more quickly, because if you can connect with what you're talking about, if you already know about what you're talking about, you're gonna write more, right? Because you know what you're talking about. So bringing in real world examples is also a way to connect with your readers. It helps you contextualize some academic topic in the real world. So, and that's like in the PI method, in your explanation, you might bring in an example, like contextualize something that's going on. And connection is also important for your ideas. So these are considerations for revision more than drafting, but you want to make sure your ideas from one paragraph to the next connect and build. And some writers like to save the best ideas for last. And that's a pretty good organizational strategy to build up to that final strong point. You know, I think it's real important to have personal opinions, and I would encourage you to pre-write what those are in the beginning. Even though academic writing tends to be more objective, the idea there is that you're talking about a subject that's interesting to everyone. And you might think that you are interesting to everyone, but the idea is that we want your perspective on an issue or a problem, but it becomes too personal. It's a whole different kind of writing when you're talking about your personal problems. Now, I do think it can be very relevant, like in an intro, to bring in a personal experience, especially if you're writing about your field, your professional field. Maybe you're writing a paper in your nursing course and you happen to be a nurse. And so it's okay it's often okay. You have to check with your assignment requirements to bring in an anecdote, as long as it doesn't shift the whole focus on you, because the paper isn't about you, it's about this problem that's going on. So if you can frame that, if you've witnessed it or experienced it yourself, you can kind of bring it in, and then when you're editing, maybe formalize it a little bit to make it more universal or more applicable to other people's situations and not just your one-time experience, because usually in an academic paper, you want your claims to be based on many examples and not just your one personal experience, which would be unique, which is super interesting for a personal essay, but it doesn't always prove that something is always the case or that something should be done just because it worked for you. Do you know what I mean? So that's why they kind of like, oh, leave your personal experience out, but it's still pretty important to feel personally connected to what you're writing about. I think you have to. You just write about the topic though, and you know, as long as you keep the paper on the topic that you're writing about and not make it about you. As soon as you put an I statement in there, the subject of the sentence becomes I instead of the topic you're writing on. So you just have to kind of, come into the Writing Center and we can help you with your language so you can work in that personal experience without making the paper suddenly about you. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. You have to also, you can find research that agrees with your viewpoint as well. Sure, you want to, if you make a claim that something is right or something is effective, you definitely want to find evidence to support that. Sure. So in the conclusion then, a typical conclusion gives the discussion closure by connecting the beginning ideas to the ending ones and reaffirming the thesis, taking into consideration the development of the ideas in the body, and finally leaving the reader with a thought to consider. So like the intro, the conclusion is a formality. It reminds me of the way we end phone calls after a long talk. The conversation begins with a specific purpose for calling, to share some news, talk about a problem, or ask for help. Then a discussion emerges, and before you conclude, or to help wrap it up and get off the phone, you bring up that original purpose for calling again, clarify anything that needs further clarification, and give the discussion closure. And here's some tips for writing a conclusion. Reginald, I hear your point. There's nothing wrong with sharing with the group, right? I think you meant like writing personal experience. So here's some tips. First of all, when drafting, plan for revision. More often than not, it's the conclusion of a first draft that finally states clearly what you've been trying to say all along. So commonly, the conclusion of the rough draft will turn into the intro of the revised draft, or you'll at least find your thesis in it. So keep that in mind. The conclusion also mirrors the intro in that final copy, but it doesn't copy it exactly. The intro is the entrance, the conclusion is the exit. So they're both doorways, they're similar. But you want the reader to walk in curious and then leave feeling satisfied and thinking about what you just said. So I don't know if that analogy helps. So they're similar, but they do have a slightly different job to do. You want the reader to take what you said and continue the conversation. So your paper isn't the last word, right? Just as you took ideas from others as you researched and built on those, you want your reader to take your ideas and continue the conversation. And this is the overarching concept of academic writing. Your paper is one discussion within a larger conversation, and it's meant to continue. Okay? Just food for thought. So here's some tools for you. And earlier, we had someone asking about APA and how to get their peers to catch up with APA format for their group paper. So another element of writing quickly without compromising quality or learning is using your available tools. And one tool you might want to try is this new APA Central app in the library. The library purchased this for you all. The first time you use it, you do have to create your own account so you can use the writing tool and save your work in the app. So if you're nervous about writing APA, you have peers that need to catch up with you because you're all writing an APA paper together, you can write your paper here using an APA template and just use this tool to help you plan and organize your research, or maybe to set up your title and references page. And then you can download what you've done as a Word document. It's pretty cool. There's lots of sample papers here as well. And in the other parts of it, I have just pointed the right part where you can actually write your paper in APA Central. But they have lots of video tutorials as well and guides about APA formatting. Here's the direct link. And so once you're logged into campus, you can access APA Central. So you can access it and all of the materials, but as soon as you have to write something, you do, like I said, you'll get a pop-up saying, create an account. Just create an account, put your email in, make a password, and you're done. And then you just use that next time to access anything you've written or saved inside the app. It's pretty cool. And then another program that you probably use regularly is Microsoft Word. And it also has useful tools to use at various stages of the writing process. And one of my favorites for drafting, since I have a bad habit of editing as I go and writing slowly, is using the draft view. And so instead of hopping into Word, like let's say I haven't even pre-written yet or written a rough draft, I try to avoid going straight to Word and setting up APA format and making it all formal, because then I feel kind of pressure, like I need to just write first. And in the draft view, the toolbar is hidden, and you can write as though you're writing on a plain sheet of paper. You can write like you're handwriting. And you can change the font style to something fun as you generate your ideas. You don't have to feel so cramped by trying to write formally when you're just getting started. And then you can always select all and change the font and double space it and go back to the print view and get your header and footer and stuff. But when you're just getting started pre-writing or drafting, you can have a little bit of freedom there, just so you can get your ideas flowing. And then I also recommend using Save As to save your writing with different names as you go along. And Word will auto-save, but it's better to be able to control when it saves. So between the first draft and the revised draft, or especially between the pre-writing and the rough draft and the revised draft and the edited draft, use different names like Draft 1, Save As Draft 2. Maybe put the title in there, or the unit number, or the course number if it helps. But give each draft a different name so you can track your progress. That way, if your power goes out and your computer crashes or something weird happens and everything freezes, or you lose your work, it's like a horrible feeling when you've just written a whole bunch and you lose your work. Use the Save As often and just change the names of the draft as you go, number them, so you can track your progress, and you can go back to an earlier draft and go, what was I saying about that? Or, gosh, I didn't end up using that quote. I'm going to go back, or you can go back to your pre-writing and see what you were originally thinking. It's really helpful to have the older drafts, especially if you want to delete a big chunk and you're afraid to. So delete it. Save it as a new name so you still have it in the older draft, just in case you want it still. Usually you don't, but it frees your mind to be ruthless as you revise and go for the bigger ideas. Another, you learn your copy and paste tools. It's so much quicker to use copy and paste than to retype. You can highlight something and select it and drag it up to another line. You can move a quote to another paragraph just by selecting it and dragging it down. So learn your Word tools. I put a link to the Microsoft Word Tips web page with different video tutorials on how to make the most of Word. And then when you're editing, especially, have your spelling and grammar check on. It'll point out most of your misspellings. It'll point out fragments. It'll point out strange comma usage. So definitely use the tools in MS Word. It'll help you along. And they have these as well in the APA Central program. Okay. Here's that link to the Microsoft Word. Yeah, we have the APA Central. Yeah, we have it. I have it linked on a couple pages. And then, of course, you can ask a tutor. One more plug for the Writing Center. At any point during any part of your writing, from the moment you get that assignment till, through editing it, we have a brand new tutoring platform. It uses video. You don't have to use video, but you can use audio. We have the whiteboard. You can share your screen. It's a really wonderful new tutoring experience. So if you haven't been to live tutoring in a while, come check us out. And I'll give you a link to our live tutoring service here in the chat. It's super cool. Have you been in Cranium Cafe yet? It's quite a nice platform. We moved out of Adobe. We used to use this kind of room for our tutoring. So here's the summary. Write quickly. We've covered so many ways to write more quickly, and I hope you picked up at least a couple things to try. So first, prepare to write and plan your writing. You want to write as a process, and all of these things are different. These are things you do, the preparing and planning before you sit down to write, because you're not writing if you're just getting started to sit down to write. You want to write as a process, draft the essay as a whole, then revise it in parts, and monitor your metacognition from the moment you read that assignment to the point of your revision and editing. You want to also think about what your understanding is. You read your own writing. Am I saying what I mean? Would a reader get it? Also, use your resources and your tools. Ask a tutor. We love you. We're here for you. And make writing a habit. Do it daily. Even if it's just 10 minutes of note-taking or just thoughts or reflection on something you read or a quote that you think you want to use, write it down. And start thinking like a writer. When you're working on writing assignment, look for connections to your topic everywhere. You may be surprised where your ideas can come from. And here's me. So thank you so much, everybody. I think it was a great discussion. I hope you got some good tips. Thank you so much, everyone, for staying.